The first time I saw the swing set behind our new house, it was moving. No kids, no wind, just the chains swaying gently like someone had just left. Theo stood at the glass door, staring through it like he already knew something I didn't. He didn't say a word, hadn't in years, but his fingers twitched against the hem of his hoodie like they always did when he was anxious. That was the day we moved to Pinehaven, and I told myself it was just a breeze. But I watched that swing until the sun went down. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury, and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name's Julia Carter. I'm 38, originally from Ashland, Oregon, but by last fall I would have moved anywhere if it meant giving my son a chance to start over. Theo was 7 when we left Portland. He hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, not since something happened at his old school. Something he never explained and no one ever did. There were no witnesses, no clear incident, just one day a call from the principal, and the next my little boy went quiet. Since then, he'd only spoken 3 words in total, but he'd draw. Every single day with the same obsessive care, a maze, a red X, and a face. Always the same one half hidden in the trees. We arrived in Pinehaven the first week of September. Quiet town, one main road. Gas station, grocery, post office, and a bar with a rusty neon sign that still said cold beer in flickering letters. To me, it looked safe. To Theo, I don't think it looked like anything at all. The rental house was on Willow Lane. Small, clean, pale gray siding and a porch swing that creaked when you walked by. The backyard backed right up to Pinehaven Elementary. You could see the jungle gym from the kitchen window. First time I noticed that I thought it would make things easier. It didn't. Theo was quiet during the tour, just wandered from room to room with his sketchpad clutched tight. But when he reached the sliding glass door and saw that schoolyard, he stopped cold. Didn't blink, didn't fidget. Just stared at the tree line like it was staring back. That night I unpacked while he sat at the table. He didn't say anything. But when I walked past, I saw what he was drawing. Same lines, same looping maze. But now he'd drawn a playground. And at the edge of it, tucked in red crayon just below a crooked tree, an X. The next morning, he started his new school. He didn't resist when I dressed him, didn't fight me at the door. He held my hand all the way to the gate, but when Mrs. Haynes, the special ed teacher, came out to meet us, he let go. When I picked him up that afternoon, he didn't say a word, just handed me a new drawing. This one had a tighter spiral in the center, the lines more organized. Another X, now in a different corner. That night I placed both drawings on the fridge. I stood there for a long time looking at them. The shapes weren't random. They matched like pieces of something bigger. By the 3rd day there were 3 pages, all drawn the same way each, with a red X, each one more detailed than the last. And in the bottom right corner of the newest page, right under a jagged tree trunk, Theo had added something I hadn't seen before. A stick figure, small, lying down, and beside it a shape, round head, 2 hollow eyes, watching. I didn't realize what I was looking at until the 4th drawing. Theo had pressed harder with the pencil that morning, the lines darker, tighter, less like loops and more like hallways. And at the very center, beneath a swirl that reminded me of a storm, was the X again. Always the X. But this time there was something new. A triangle with a dot in the center drawn so lightly it nearly disappeared into the page. I didn't ask him what it meant. He wouldn't have answered, and I'd learned not to force questions. Instead, I laid all 4 pages out across the kitchen floor and just stared. Together they formed something larger. The edges met like puzzle pieces. A maze, yes, but it wasn't random. It had a center, a destination. And whatever it was, Theo had been building it for days without saying a word. The next morning, I walked him to school as usual. He squeezed my hand twice at the fence, our quiet way of saying, "I'll try and then let go." I watched him disappear into the building and didn't move until the doors closed behind him. Something about that triangle stuck with me. Later that morning, I sat at the kitchen table with his drawings spread out again and called Dr. Ravi, his old therapist in Portland. I hadn't spoken to him since the move, but I needed a voice that knew Theo. "He's drawing again," I said. "Same shapes, same patterns every day. And now he's adding symbols." Ravi asked me to describe them. When I mentioned the triangle with the dot, there was a pause on the line. Then he said it could be organizational play, something called schema behavior, where children create and repeat patterns to feel safe. I wanted to believe that. But when I asked him what it meant if each new drawing fit the last like a map, he didn't have an answer. Just told me to keep documenting everything and to watch for changes in behavior. That afternoon, I picked Theo up from school and noticed a small group of parents gathered near the fence speaking in low tones. One woman's voice drifted as we passed. "Anniversary's next week." Still no sign. I didn't stop walking, but something in my chest tightened. Inside, Mrs. Haynes asked if I had a minute. She brought me into the front office and kept her voice low. "I just wanted to let you know," she said gently. "This time of year can be hard around here. One of our second graders went missing last fall. Her name was Emily Watts. She was last seen near the edge of the playground during recess, and they never found her. No signs of foul play. No confirmed evidence of abduction, just gone." I asked if it happened near the woods behind the school, and Mrs. Haynes nodded. "We try not to scare the students," she said. "But if Theo ever mentions anything unusual, anything at all, please let us know." That evening, I pulled Theo's latest drawing from his backpack and pinned it beside the others on the fridge. 5 pages now, each one more exact than the last. The newest had a darker X. It looked almost agitated, scribbled into the paper like a warning. And just beside it, something that looked like a tree. Long, uneven lines. And next to the base of that tree, a stick figure. Small, lying down. I stood there a long time staring at it. I didn't know what it meant, not really. But it didn't feel like a coincidence. The next morning I woke up early. The sky was still dim and the house was quiet, but Theo was already awake. He was sitting cross-legged at the table, sketching in silence. I poured myself some coffee and watched from the doorway. His pencil moved quickly, hands smudged with graphite. When he finished, he slid the page across the table toward me. No words, just that familiar gesture. This one was different. The spiral in the center had deepened thicker lines drawn over and over again. From it, paths radiated outward like spokes from a wheel. And again, the triangle with the dot. Smaller this time, tucked near the edge. I brought out the town map I'd picked up from the library and started lining up his drawings over it. One by one, I began tracing the paths. And everything, the spirals, the trees, the strange symbols, it all led back to a single place. The forest. That afternoon, once Theo was settled back at school, I walked behind the house to the chain-link fence. There was a small gap near the edge where the metal bent away. I slipped through it and crossed the playground gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The swing set creaked in the breeze. Beyond it, the path began. Narrow, uneven, old. The trees swallowed the light almost immediately. It was quiet inside. No wind, no birds, just the sound of my own footsteps. 10 minutes in, I came to a small clearing. A circle of moss-covered ground pressed flat in the middle, like something had stood there for a long time. In the center was a pile of stones, stacked, not scattered. Deliberate. I walked around it slowly, scanning the ground. That's when I saw it. Half buried at the base of one stone was a piece of fabric, pink, frayed at the edges. I crouched and brushed the dirt away with the back of my hand. It was torn, faded, but it looked like it could have come from a child's shirt. Then I heard it, a twig snapping behind me. I stood quickly, heart in my throat. "Hello?" I called out, trying to stay calm. No response. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a shadow slipping behind a trunk. Then nothing. Another branch cracked, closer this time. I stepped back from the stones, trying to remember which direction I came from. Everything looked the same. And then a voice, low, worn, and close. "You shouldn't be here." I turned. An older man stood just beyond the tree line, leaning on a walking stick. His jacket was patched at the elbows, his face lined and unreadable beneath a canvas hat. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to trespass, my son drew this place." He tilted his head slightly. "Little boy. Quiet. Lives on Willow Lane." My chest tightened. "You know him?" "Seen him," he said. "He watches the trees. They watch back." I didn't know what to say. Why shouldn't I be here? He looked past me toward the stones. "That place doesn't forget," he said. "Things happen out here that don't stay buried." I swallowed hard. "Are you talking about Emily Watts?" His expression didn't change, but after a pause, he said, "She wasn't the first, just the one they noticed." And before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked into the trees. Gone. Like he'd never been there. That night I sat at the kitchen table long after Theo had gone to bed. I laid his drawings out again, every line more chilling than the last. In the middle of the newest one, the spiral had darkened like it was swallowing everything around it. I pulled out my laptop and typed her name, Emily Watts. The article was brief. 7 years old. Last seen near the edge of the playground during afternoon recess. No signs of a struggle. A pink shirt, black sneakers, unicorn backpack. I closed the laptop and walked to Theo's room. He was asleep, curled up under the covers, a pencil still clutched in his hand. On the floor beside him was a new drawing. Tall black trees, leaning inward like they were bending to whisper something, and in the center, a tiny figure. A girl, facing the trees. I turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the quiet. Tomorrow I'd go back to the woods, but this time I wouldn't go in alone. I didn't tell anyone about the man in the woods. Not at first. I wasn't even sure I'd really seen him. But something about the way he spoke stuck with me. That place doesn't forget. It circled my thoughts all evening, even as I tried to keep things normal at home. Theo didn't draw that night. He sat at the table with a blank page in front of him, pencil in hand, but didn't move. I didn't push. I made dinner, washed dishes, checked the locks twice before bed. The next morning, he still hadn't drawn anything, just stared out the window like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. I dropped him off at school like usual, then drove straight to the police station. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street and sat there for 10 full minutes, engine off, watching people come and go. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe a sign that someone would take it seriously. Maybe just the courage to be wrong. But in the end, I left. I didn't tell them about the stones, or the pink fabric, or the clearing that looked like it hadn't been touched by time. I didn't even tell them what Theo had drawn. Back at home, I laid the drawings out again. There were 6 now. The latest had no figure, no spiral, no triangle, just a single square, plain, sharp lines, and inside it a circle with 2 dots. A face, drawn in red, staring out. That afternoon, when I picked Theo up, he handed me another page before he even got in the car. He didn't look at me, just climbed into the back seat and pulled the door shut. The drawing was nearly identical to the last one, but this time the square had a doorway. And just inside it, next to the red face, was a smaller figure, stick-thin, lying down. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew what it looked like. Someone was trapped. That night I called the school, asked if Mrs. Haynes had a few minutes the next morning. She met me in the front office before classes started. Same calm expression, same tired eyes. I asked her if the name Daniel Parrish meant anything. Her mouth tightened slightly, then she nodded. He was a parent volunteer here for a while, mostly during recess or cleanup days. Why do you ask? I kept my voice steady. Did he have access to any part of the school others didn't? She looked confused. No offices or anything like that, but he did help repaint the old tool shed behind the gym last year. Spent a few weeks on it, had the key while he worked. I asked if anyone had ever searched that shed after Emily went missing. Her answer came slower this time. I don't think so. It's not really locked anymore. We use it to store cones and garden supplies. I don't know if anyone thought to check it. She paused. Why? What's going on? I just thanked her and said I'd let her know if anything came up. That afternoon, I waited until school let out and walked the long way around the building, past the playground, past the edge of the lot until the trees started thinning again. The shed sat half in shadow, roof slumped slightly on one side. I tried the handle. It opened with a groan. The air inside was stale dust, old paint mildew. Rakes leaned against the far wall. A shelf stacked with cracked buckets. And behind that a faint scuff on the floor, like something had been dragged. I stepped closer and leaned in. Just barely visible under the shelf lip was a scrap of pink fabric. Torn. Wedged deep in the floorboards. I didn't touch it. I stood there for a long time, not breathing, listening to the creaks of the wood and the slow tick of something dripping outside. I didn't hear anyone approach, but a branch cracked behind me. I turned fast, heart slamming, but no one was there. Just trees. Still. Watching. That night I didn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt louder. The ice maker. The furnace kicking on the wind, pressing against the siding. Theo had gone quiet again, too quiet even for him. No drawing. No pencil. Just a blank stare at the fridge where the others were still taped up. I made tea I didn't drink. I checked the windows twice. I kept the porch light on all night. Around 1 a.m., I woke to a sound. Soft, repeating, scratching. I followed it to Theo's room. The light was on under his door. I knocked. No answer. I opened it slowly and found him on the floor, pages spread out like puzzle pieces. He was drawing again. His hand moved fast, pressing hard enough to tear the edges. I knelt beside him, careful not to startle him. He didn't look up. The drawing wasn't a maze this time. It was a face. Angular, hollow eyes, no mouth. And around it, those same swirling loops like ripples. At the bottom, in Theo's handwriting, he watched. I asked him quietly if that was the man who hurt Emily. He didn't nod, didn't shake his head, but he flipped the paper over and pointed. On the back, he'd drawn the triangle with the dot again. Small, precise. I asked him, "Can you show me where you saw him?" He didn't answer, just picked up a new piece of paper and started to draw. The next morning, I took that page with me to the Pinehaven Police Department. Officer Reyes was at the front desk. I asked if he had a minute. He brought me into a small office, closed the door, and waited. I laid the drawings out in front of him, the face, the triangle, the one Theo had done that morning. "He's trying to tell us something," I said. "I think he saw this man." Daniel Parrish. Reyes studied the images for a long time. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a file, and slid a photo across the desk. A man in his 40s, plain features, no expression. "Is this him?" he asked. "I can't say for sure," I said. "But Theo draws that symbol around the face every time, the triangle with the dot." Reyes nodded slowly. "We've seen that before." He explained that a few years back in another town nearby, a boy had gone missing. His younger brother claimed someone was watching them from the woods, drew the same symbol on a tree before it happened. I asked why no one followed up on it. Reyes didn't answer right away. There wasn't enough to go on. Until now. He stood. "We're searching the shed today. By the time we got to the school, the last bell had just rung. Reyes had a warrant in hand. He and another officer walked around the back while I waited in the car. Theo sat beside me, his sketchbook in his lap like a shield. The shed door opened. Flashlights moved inside. A few minutes passed. Then Reyes stepped out holding something small. He walked toward us, carefully cradling it in both hands. A pink sneaker, dirt-stained, worn down at the heel. Theo sat forward in his seat and tapped his sketchbook. I opened it. That morning's drawing had changed. He'd filled the page, now tree trunks overlapping, and in the center a door. Beneath it, written in faint pencil, "She's still there." Back at home, he laid out every drawing he'd made since the day we moved, arranged them in a perfect order across the living room floor. They told a story now, a trail through the woods, the face, the door, the ex, the girl. I sat beside him. "Did you see her?" I asked. "Emily." He nodded. "Just once." She waved. He whispered. I hugged him, careful not to squeeze too tight. That night, after he went to bed, I stood by the fridge looking at the last page again. The face, the square, the triangle, the words. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I wasn't the only one watching anymore. That night, after everything with the shed, after Reyes took the sneaker into evidence, after Theo laid out his drawings like pieces of something he hadn't been allowed to say aloud, I just sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't reach for my laptop. I just watched the hallway where his bedroom door sat cracked open, a strip of warm yellow spilling out across the floor like it might hold the next clue. I thought about how quiet it had all been, how no one in this town had made noise after Emily disappeared. No vigils, no searches after the first week, just silence. Like they all decided together that forgetting was safer than remembering. The next morning, I called Dr. Ravi again. I asked him if children like Theo kids who've stopped speaking ever use drawing as a kind of recall, like memory being translated onto paper. He said sometimes yes, especially when trauma is tangled up with sensory patterns. But he also said something I hadn't heard him say before. What he's doing now, it's not just expression. It's structure. It's sequential. That word stayed with me. Sequential. Like he wasn't just remembering. He was trying to warn us about what was next. By noon, I was back at the kitchen table with a stack of fresh copies of the drawings, trying to match each one to the layout of the forest behind the school. I even printed out an aerial photo of the neighborhood from the county assessor's site and started overlaying lines. The triangle, the spirals, the marked trees, they weren't abstract. They were coordinates. It all narrowed toward one location, not the shed. Further out. Deeper. Theo was quiet again after school, more withdrawn than usual. He didn't even glance at the fridge where his last drawing was still pinned. I didn't push. I just made dinner. Let him sit beside me in silence while I read. But that night, while I was cleaning up, I heard something from the living room, a soft page turning the drag of pencil across paper. I dried my hands and peeked in. He was back on the floor, cross-legged, drawing with focused, almost urgent movements. When I walked in, he looked up and pushed the page toward me. It was different this time. More deliberate. A square room again, but this one had shelves along the walls. Inside, a single stick figure standing, watching something just outside the lines. And at the top of the page, faint but legible, he'd written something for the first time in weeks. She fell. That's when I called the police. I didn't give them every detail, just said I'd been walking behind the school and found something odd. A charm bracelet. With a name. Emily. The dispatcher's voice changed after that. 10 minutes later, Officer Reyes was on my porch. I showed him the charm, the drawings, the printed maps. I told him everything I knew without crossing the line into speculation. He didn't interrupt, just listened, eyes flicking across the sketches one by one. When I said Theo had never seen that part of the woods, had never been anywhere near it, he sat back in his chair and said, "No one's been willing to say it out loud until now." I asked, "Say what?" He stared through the front window toward the tree line. That Emily didn't just wander off, that someone brought her out there, and that your son might have seen more than anyone realizes. I asked him if he had kids. He didn't answer right away. Then he said I did. He left soon after that charm in a small bag, drawings under his arm. The front door closed softly behind him. Later that night, I found Theo asleep on the couch with another page tucked under his arm. This one was simple, a single X, and next to it a small figure standing upright, facing out. The next day, something shifted. It happened at the school when I came to pick Theo up early for a therapy appointment. I was waiting in the front lobby when I heard two parents talking near the door. Their voices were low, but not low enough. "He was here that day," one of them said. "Volunteering. Just disappeared after." The other one replied, "Creepy guy. Always around the kids." But nobody questioned it. I pretended to look at my phone, but I heard every word. That night I pulled up every article I could find on the Emily Watts case. Most were sparse local coverage, careful language, no theories. But buried in an old comment thread on a forgotten blog post, I found a name, Daniel Parrish. Former school volunteer. Left town quietly just after Emily went missing. No charges, no public statements. No one seemed to have asked why. I searched him next, found a PTA newsletter listing him as a volunteer for reading time and school cleanup. Then something more recent, an old used car listing. Transfer of ownership to a Daniel Parrish in Summer about 40 miles east. The address was still visible on the document. The next morning I packed Theo's lunch, left a note for Mrs. Green next door, and told her I'd be gone a few hours. She didn't ask where. She just nodded and said, "We'll keep an eye on him." I drove to Summer with both hands clenched on the wheel. The address was easy to find. Quiet street, single-story house, white pickup in the driveway, faded Pinehaven PTA bumper sticker still peeling from the back window. I parked down the street and waited. After a few minutes, the front door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, khakis, clean sweater, thinning hair. He walked to the mailbox, grabbed a few envelopes, and went back inside without looking up. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The way he moved, the quiet, practiced calm, it was the same kind of silence I'd seen in Theo's eyes. Controlled, taut. I took photos, the plates, the house, the sticker, and drove home in near silence. That evening, Theo placed a new drawing on the table without saying a word. A square room again, 4 walls, a single door. Inside it, a red circle with 2 hollow dots, a face. I looked at it, then back at the photo I'd taken earlier. The shed behind the school came to mind. But so did something else. Something I'd seen from a distance the last time I walked the fence line near the edge of the gym. Overgrown, easy to miss. Another small outbuilding, older than the first. The next morning I asked Mrs. Haynes again, did Daniel Parrish ever have a space of his own on campus? She said no. But he did repaint the tool shed behind the gym the year before Emily disappeared. Helped clear it out, too. I asked, did anyone ever search it? She hesitated. I don't think so. It's mostly for gardening stuff. Nobody really goes in there anymore. I thanked her. Didn't explain why. That afternoon I went back. Walked past the fence line and around the far edge of the property. The second shed was barely visible under the ivy, paint peeling, roof sagging, but the door was intact. I tried the handle. It opened with a low creak, and that's where I'll leave it for now. Because what I saw next didn't belong to any school inventory, and it didn't look like something that had been forgotten. It looked like something someone wanted to forget. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside the shed was the temperature. It was cooler than outside, still almost sealed. The air smelled of old varnish and mildew, but underneath that, there was something else. Dust and time, maybe. I stood just inside the doorway and let my eyes adjust. The space was small. No windows, no electricity. A few cracked plastic bins lined the back wall. Rusted gardening tools, a bag of potting soil hardened like stone. But near the floor behind a low shelf, something caught my eye. a faint line of disturbed dust, just enough to show something had been moved recently. I crouched, reached behind the shelf, and pulled gently. The shelf gave way with a reluctant scrape, and behind it, wedged between the plywood wall and floor, was a small piece of fabric. I didn't have to pick it up to know what it was. Faded pink frayed along one edge. It matched the piece I'd found near the stone pile in the woods. I stood slowly, heart thudding in my chest, and took one step back toward the door. Just then I heard a branch snapping outside. I froze, waited, listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Just silence. After a minute, I stepped out, closed the door carefully behind me, and didn't look back. That night, I didn't tell Theo where I'd been. He'd already gone to bed, his drawings still scattered across the rug like breadcrumbs. But something had shifted in him again. He was more still than usual. Like the storm had passed but left everything inside him hollowed out. I didn't push. I just turned out the light and sat by his door until I was sure he was asleep. I needed to understand what he was trying to tell me. So I pulled the drawings out, again spread them across the dining table, and started from the beginning. Every path, every X, every spiral. They weren't just locations. They were sequences. A trail from somewhere to somewhere else. Each page built on the last positions, shifting subtly figures, growing clearer. When I reached the most recent page, I saw it for the first time. Something I'd missed. In the bottom right corner of one of the drawings, the one with the large central spiral, was a symbol. A triangle, yes, but it wasn't just floating like before. This one was placed deliberately over a shaded patch of trees. And inside it the dot had been drawn darker, almost scratched into the paper. I pulled out the town map again and started aligning the shapes with landmarks I recognized. The school, the fence, the woods. It took time, but eventually I saw it. The triangle wasn't just a symbol, it was a reference point. That triangle matched a part of the forest just outside the school's property, right where I'd followed Daniel Parrish's truck a week earlier. The clearing, the path, the structure tucked behind the trees. It wasn't a tool shed. Not the second one. I knew that now. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the wind move through the pine trees behind the schoolyard. They bent gently, quietly, like they knew how to keep secrets. The next morning I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I packed a small flashlight, wore hiking boots, tucked my phone in my coat pocket. I told Mrs. Green that Theo might need an extra snack after school. She nodded, didn't ask questions. I drove to Summer first, not to the house this time, but to the trailhead where I'd seen him disappear days earlier. I parked off the gravel and waited. At 11:52 a.m., the white pickup truck pulled in. Daniel Parrish stepped out, same careful posture, same quiet calm. He walked into the woods with a large flashlight in one hand. I gave him a 5-minute lead, then followed. The path was narrow, worn down by years of quiet feet. It climbed slightly, then dipped into a thicker patch of trees. I moved slowly, keeping low. And then I saw it. The structure. Not a cabin exactly, not a shed either. Just 4 walls, a sloped roof, weathered siding, and a padlock on the front. I ducked behind a pine and watched. Daniel unlocked the door, stepped inside, and disappeared. I crept closer. A small window on the side was cracked open just wide enough to see in. What I saw stopped me cold. The walls were lined with old drawings, children's drawings, some torn, water-damaged. One showed a girl with long braids standing by a swing set. Another, a house with no windows. On a narrow shelf there were toys. A stuffed unicorn faded from sun and time. A bracelet. A small pair of shoes, pink with a scuffed toe. I raised my phone, snapped a few photos through the glass, and turned to go. That's when I stepped on a twig. The crack echoed like thunder. Inside, Daniel turned. His face moved toward the window. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches caught my coat, snagged my sleeves. I didn't stop. I could hear something behind me, footsteps, or maybe just my own panic, but I didn't look back. I reached the road, fumbled with my keys, slammed the door, started the car, and drove straight to the Pinehaven Police Department. Reyes was at the front desk. I placed the photos on the counter. There's a building in the woods off Route 9, I told him. It's not on any map. Inside are drawings, toys, a bracelet that matches one in the Watts family photo. He didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he stood. "Get a team," he told the officer behind him. That night, Theo handed me a new drawing. This one was different. The forest was still there, but the trees weren't closing in this time. There was an open door. And standing in the doorway was a girl, facing the light. I didn't ask who it was. I just said thank you. He looked at me, then really looked, and I could see something in him I hadn't seen in months. Relief, maybe, or the beginning of it. I tucked the drawing beside the others, smoothed the edges flat. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of what came next, because I finally knew what we were looking at. Not symbols, not guesses, but a path. One only he could see. And now others were starting to follow. By sunrise, the forest was sealed off. Crime scene tape fluttered between trees like fragile yellow threads, sagging where dew had soaked through. Officers moved in careful patterns, slow, deliberate gloved hands steady. They didn't speak much, just pointed, photographed, took notes. From where I stood with Officer Reyes, you couldn't see the full shape of the structure, just the top edge of its sagging roof peeking out behind a ridge of brush and vine. But what had been rumor, what had lived only in drawings and shadows, was now real enough to cordon off and name. Reyes kept a steady eye on the clearing arms, crossed his voice quieter than usual. They found the bracelet, he said. Same unicorn charm as the one in the Watts family photo. It's hers. I didn't say anything. He added, "We found more than that, too. Items that don't belong to Emily. Old, different styles, names we don't recognize yet. I didn't ask how many. I didn't want numbers. I just wanted to know how long it had been going on." Reyes shook his head. "That building, it's not on any old maps. Not school property, not county. Whoever used it, they made sure no one noticed." I glanced at the woods behind us at the school playground, still visible through the pines. The swing set moved slightly in the breeze, the chains catching sun like strands of wire. I asked if Parrish was in custody. Reyes nodded. "Picked him up just after midnight. Cooperative. Too cooperative. Claimed he was out for a walk. Said he hasn't been to Pinehaven in over a year." He looked at me. "You believe that I didn't answer?" He didn't expect me to. At home, Theo sat cross-legged on the rug again, sketching slowly. His lines were lighter now, less frantic. I watched him from the kitchen arms, crossed, unsure whether to interrupt. After a few minutes, he slid the page toward me. It wasn't like the others. This one had color, faint greens and golds. The trees weren't closing in this time, they were glowing. And between them, 3 figures stood in a clearing. 1 woman, 1 boy, and a girl with long braids. They were all facing forward. "She's free now," I said quietly. Theo nodded once. Later that day, Reyes knocked on our door again. He carried a small file folder, which he didn't open right away. He sat at the kitchen table, same place he'd sat the first time he saw the drawings. "They've confirmed it was used over multiple years," he said. "Emily's case is officially reopened and upgraded. No longer a missing person." He paused. "We also found something else." I waited. Micah Dreyer, one of Parrish's former students from a district he taught at part-time years ago. His name was carved into one of the boards inside that structure. He looked up. "He's alive. Lives about 3 towns over. Had some run-ins petty theft squatting, but nothing that stuck. We brought him in this morning. He asked to speak to you. I wasn't sure I heard that right." Reyes nodded, said, "She's the only one who listened." I drove to the station just before sunset. The sky was soft with that early evening stillness that makes everything feel paused. Micah was already waiting in a small interview room, hands folded, foot tapping beneath the table. Maybe 22, but he looked older, worn. He didn't look at me right away, just stared down at his hands like they weren't part of him. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I didn't know what it was he said. Back then, I thought it was just pretend, some game he made up. We called it the clubhouse. I didn't interrupt. He kept going. He told us it was for quiet talks, secret stories. But I remember her. I remember Emily. He looked up at me. Not her face, just how quiet she was. The way she didn't run, the way she didn't speak. He rubbed his face. I told myself she went home after. I told myself I imagined it. But I didn't. I asked why he never came forward. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. Because I was a kid, and he said no one would believe me, and I believed him. He glanced at the door. But your kid, he remembered. And he wasn't even there. He shook his head almost in disbelief. That's the part that gets me. I was there. And I stayed quiet. And your kid, he saw it anyway. I leaned forward. You're not quiet now. He met my eyes, held them for just a second, and then nodded. The next day, Pinehaven held a press conference. Reyes stood behind a wooden podium flanked by investigators and a single district representative. Cameras clicked. Reporters stood quietly with notepads and calm faces. No one raised a voice. Reyes spoke plainly. Evidence recovered at the Pinehaven site has led to the reopening of multiple cold cases. Daniel Parrish is in custody and facing federal charges for the concealment and suspected harm of multiple children. Additional charges are pending. No one clapped. No one needed to. That night I kept Theo home. We sat outside on the porch while the sun dropped behind the treetops. He had a juice box in one hand and his sketchbook in the other. But he wasn't drawing. He just looked out at the woods. I said, I think you saved her. He leaned gently against my shoulder. After a long pause, he whispered, She saved me too. The next morning, the call came from Reyes. His voice was tighter than usual. We found something else, he said. A second room. Beneath the floor. I didn't ask what kind of room. I didn't have to. A hatch, he continued, covered in loose planks, small, sealed, long time. He hesitated. There were bones. I gripped the phone tighter. Emily. He didn't answer right away. We don't know. But it's not just one set. By that afternoon, the story had broken. The school shut down temporarily. Reporters lined the perimeter of the forest. News vans, drone cameras, flashbulbs. I didn't watch any of it. I didn't turn on the TV. The details didn't need repeating. What mattered was already in motion. That structure in the woods had never been just a hiding place. It had been a pattern, a system. Something passed quietly from one year to the next, invisible in its normalcy. At the kitchen table, Reyes sat across from me again, his fingers pressed together like he was holding something fragile. Emily's remains weren't in the second room, he said, but another girl's were. Items at the scene match a case from 12 years ago. Different town, same age, same story. He closed the file in front of him. Parish's teaching history shows short-term contracts, volunteer roles, mentorships. Every district has at least one missing person case tied to a child. I didn't speak. The walls of the kitchen felt thinner than usual, like they could dissolve at any second. That night, Theo drew again. Not the face, not the spiral, not the triangle, just the trees, this time in warm gold and soft brown. Between them, two silhouettes walking side by side, one taller, one small. At the bottom of the page, he'd written one word: found. And I believed him. The call came just after 7. I was folding laundry on the couch, the TV on mute. Theo at the kitchen table, scribbling in his sketchbook, not drawing anything in particular, just motion. The voice on the other end was soft, measured. "He's here," the woman said. "Micah Dreyer. He came back to the station this afternoon and asked to speak with you." I paused. Why me? There was a moment of hesitation. He said, "You were the only person who looked, the only one who listened." I didn't ask anything else. I just grabbed my coat, told Mrs. Green I'd be back in an hour, and left Theo with his headphones on coloring beside the window. The drive to the station felt different this time. Not because the weight had lifted, it hadn't, but because something about Micah's return told me we weren't circling anymore. We were close. When I walked into the interview room, he was already seated, hands tucked under his thighs, shoulders curved in slightly, like he was trying to shrink from the edges of the room. His eyes flicked up briefly when I sat down across from him. No smile, no preamble, just a quiet, tired sort of knowing. I should have said something. He muttered. A long time ago. I waited. Let the silence settle. He rubbed the heel of his palm against his jaw, then started talking slow at first, like his body wasn't fully caught up with his memory. When I was 9, he used to pick me up for what he called reading days. Just the two of us. The other kids didn't ask. He said I was special, that he could see things in me no one else did. His voice cracked a little on that line. At first it was just stories. We'd sit in this little room behind the school and he'd read to me. Nothing weird, just quiet, comfortable even. But then one day he said we were going on a field trip, just us. I didn't say anything. He stared at the table. He drove me out to this place, middle of the woods. He said it was a clubhouse, that it was for kids like me, for kids who understood secrets. I watched his hands tremble slightly as he picked at a cuticle. He brought me there 4 times. Nothing happened the first 3. Just books, talks. But the 4th time, his breath caught. There was someone else there. A girl. I never saw her face, just heard her. The way she moved. Careful. Small. Like she didn't want to be heard. He looked up, then directly at me for the first time. It was Emily. I know it now. I knew it then, but I didn't want to. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. He told me not to talk. Said nobody would believe me. Said if I told, I'd be the one in trouble. So I didn't. I let that sit. But now you're here. He nodded slowly. Because your son drew what I saw. And he wasn't even there. That shook me up. I figured if a kid who wasn't even there could carry it, then I didn't have the right to keep quiet anymore. I thanked him. He didn't respond, just looked away, then whispered something I almost didn't catch. There were more drawings. On the wall inside that room. Different ones. Some of them weren't Emily. I think I wasn't the only boy who went there. When I got home, Theo was asleep on the couch. One of his arms was curled under his cheek, the other still clutching his sketchbook. I didn't disturb him. Just sat on the floor beside him and gently slid the notebook from his hand. The drawing was strange. Not a map this time. Not trees or spirals or doors. Just a small square blank inside with dozens of faint lines stretching outward like cracks. In one corner, a shape I hadn't seen before, a single eye. Nothing else. No face. Just the eye staring. The next morning, the district held another press conference. This one was tighter, more formal. Legal counsel stood to one side, school officials on the other. Reyes read a short statement confirming that Daniel Parrish had been moved to a state holding facility pending additional charges. The remains recovered from beneath the hidden room were being analyzed by state forensic teams. One was tentatively linked to a 2011 case from Grant County. A second may go back even further. No names released yet. I didn't go. I sat with Theo in the library instead. He pulled a book about Saturn from the shelf and took it to the reading corner on his own. He didn't look back at me, just settled in, turned the pages slowly, lips moving silently as he followed the words. I sat on the floor near the picture books and let my eyes drift over rows of spines. I kept thinking about that eye in his drawing. How it wasn't just looking, it was watching, like something still hadn't let go. That afternoon, I walked to the edge of the woods again. The police tape had been removed, but the path to the clearing was still marked by flags and footprints. I followed it. No one else was around. The cabin, if you could call it that, had been cleared out. Evidence gathered structure stabilized and a simple lock placed on the door. On the far side of the clearing where the pile of stones had once stood, there was now a bench. Simple wood, small plaque. It had been installed by the PTA with community funding. The plaque read, "In memory, in courage, in truth." I sat there for a while. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The trees were quiet now. No whispers, no movement. Just air. Just light. On my way out, I passed a group of teachers walking the trail with small laminated cards pointing things out, teaching signs of animal tracks identifying trees. They smiled when they passed me. I smiled back. No one said anything. Later that evening, Theo brought me another drawing. This one was different again. A clearing bathed in golden light. A path stretching into the distance. No spiral. No X. In the foreground, 3 children stood together. 1 boy, 1 girl, and another figure taller watching over them. At the bottom, he'd written something small. "It's not dark anymore." I smoothed the page, pressed it flat on the table, and looked at him. "Are you okay now?" I asked. He didn't speak, just nodded. Then he looked out the window at the trees. And for the first time since we moved to Pinehaven, I didn't see fear in his eyes. I saw distance and peace, as if whatever had been staring back at him from the woods had finally turned away. The trial began just after Labor Day. A stretch of unseasonably warm weather held over Pinehaven like a thick breath clinging to the courthouse steps and pressing down on the crowd that had started to gather each morning. I didn't attend every day, couldn't, but I went when I could, sat near the back just outside the direct line of cameras, and listened. Daniel Parrish looked smaller in person. Not frail, not sickly, just ordinary. And that's what struck me. How plain he was. Clean shirt, hair combed, a small notepad in front of him which he barely touched. He didn't speak much. His lawyers did most of the work. But every now and then, during witness testimony or photo presentations, he'd turn slightly toward the jury like he wanted them to see his eyes. Not pleading, just human. As if reminding them that monsters don't always come dressed in darkness. Sometimes they wear faculty badges and hand out stickers and remember your birthday. Reyes testified on the 3rd day. His voice was steady, clear. He walked the jury through each piece of evidence. The notebook recovered from the cabin. The DNA matches tied to 2 separate cold cases, the hand-drawn symbols etched into the underside of the trap door, nearly identical to the spirals in Theo's drawings. Then came the recorded interviews. They played a portion of Micah's statement. Not the whole thing, just the segment where he described being taken to the woods, hearing another child's voice, the scent of damp stone and old paper. His voice cracked in that part just slightly, but no one in the courtroom moved, not even the bailiff. The silence after was thicker than anything I've ever sat through. On the 5th day, the prosecution brought in a child psychologist to testify about grooming behaviors and the patterns common in long-term abuse cases, especially those that exploit trust, routine, and institutional blind spots. They referenced records from multiple school districts, temporary teaching contracts, community programs, volunteer mentorships, each one with gaps, missing children, unexplained dismissals. I watched Parrish's expression as they read those names aloud. He blinked. Nothing more. The jury looked down at their notes. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my eyes fixed on the prosecutor's collarbone. Not the eyes, not the audience. Just one spot solid and still. I explained how Theo's drawings had started, how they matched details that hadn't been made public. I explained the night I followed the path to the woods, the colors, the silence, the shift in the air that told me something was wrong long before anyone believed it. When they asked how I knew it was Emily, I answered quietly, because no one else was looking for her. But my son was. I stepped down without looking at Parrish. I didn't want him to see anything in me that resembled closure, because that's not what it was. It was duty. The verdict came on a Thursday morning 2 weeks after the trial opened. The courthouse was quieter that day. Maybe people didn't want to be there for the end. Maybe they didn't expect one. But the jury filed in just before 10, and the foreperson read the list without emotion. Guilty. On all counts. The sentence would be finalized in November, but for now, Parrish was remanded without bail. Life without parole was already in writing. Outside, the sky had turned that late summer gray that promises nothing. Not rain, not heat. Just a dull, endless in-between. I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't wait for Reyes. I walked back to the car, turned the ignition, and let the air blow until the windows cleared. That evening, a woman named Sharon Watts reached out through the DA's office, Emily's mother. We met at the small park near the edge of town, the one with the old climbing dome and rubber mulch that sticks to your shoes. She wore a navy windbreaker and carried a folded piece of paper tucked into her back pocket. She didn't hug me, didn't cry, just sat beside me on the bench and stared at the empty swing set. I didn't believe she was gone, she said. Not fully. Even after they said she was. Even after the years passed. Her voice didn't tremble. But when I saw your son's drawings, I knew. I knew she'd left something behind. I nodded. She pulled the paper from her pocket, unfolded it. It was one of Theo's drawings, the triangle with the spiral. She traced the edge with her thumb. She used to draw something like this, she said, when she was little. Called it her safe place, said it was where her stories lived. She folded the page again, careful with the corners. You gave her back to me. Not in the way I prayed for, but you gave her back. I didn't know what to say. She didn't need me to. She stood after a few minutes, nodded once, and walked toward the parking lot. I stayed on the bench, eyes on the swing set. Let the quiet fill up every space it could. Later that night, Reyes called. He said they'd traced more cases to Parrish cases outside our county, some even out of state, patterns stretching back almost 2 decades. There'll be more trials, he said. More families. More names. He paused. But it started with Theo. That matters. I thanked him. He didn't stay on the line long. Just said, get some rest, and hung up. I watched Theo sleep that night. Just stood in his doorway, listened to his breathing. His sketchbook was closed on the nightstand, a blue crayon still in his hand. Whatever he was dreaming, it didn't seem heavy. His brow was smooth. No furrow, no tension, just peace. And for the first time since that first night in Pinehaven, I didn't feel the woods pressing against the windows. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel followed. I just felt still, as if for one long, quiet moment the story had finished what it came to say. The leaves started to change early that year. By the end of September, the trees behind our house had turned gold and rust, and for the first time since we moved in, I let the windows stay open. The swing set didn't creak anymore. The air felt lighter, like something had finally passed through and kept going. Theo started using colors again, greens, blues, soft orange. He didn't draw spirals anymore, and when he picked up his sketch pad now, it was mostly animals, trees, the curve of a path. I didn't ask what they meant. I didn't need to. He still doesn't talk much. That hasn't changed. But he hums sometimes. Little quiet tunes when he's building something or lost in thought. And there's peace in it. Real peace, not the kind you try to convince yourself of. He laughs too, rarely. But when it happens, it's like the sound belongs here. Like it's always belonged here, even through the silence. There were more cases after Daniel Parrish's conviction. More families that came forward, some with drawings, others with journals or strange recollections that had gone ignored for years. Micah's story helped a few of them speak up. His testimony didn't just lock a man away, it cracked something open. And while that doesn't undo the damage, it gave others a place to begin. A few of the families reached out to me. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others didn't say anything at all. They just sent photos of the woods near their own towns, of old toys of trees marked with carvings they hadn't noticed until now. We don't keep in close contact, but we're part of something. Not a community exactly. More like a chain, a quiet one. Mrs. Watts and I still talk. Not often, but we meet sometimes at the park or leave messages on birthdays. She keeps a small frame of Emily's school photo by her window. Says she likes to imagine what she would have looked like at 18, and I understand that now the need to preserve a future that never came to give it shape. She asked once if I believed in ghosts. I told her I don't know, but I do believe that places remember, and I believe some memories stay close until someone's ready to see them. Reyes transferred out of Pinehaven not long after the final sentencing. Bigger department closer to his sister. He left a voicemail the morning he packed up, said Theo reminded him of someone he used to be. Someone who didn't give up on the truth even when no one was listening. I kept that message. I don't play it often, but I haven't deleted it either. There's no plaque at the school, no official memorial. Just a small stone bench near the edge of the woods with no name on it. Theo helped build it. It was his idea. He picked the spot facing the trees, but not buried in them. He sat there for a long time the first day it was finished. Then he stood up, wiped the leaves from the seat, and walked back without a word. I don't know if full healing is something we ever reach. I think maybe we just learn to carry what's left and hope it grows lighter with time. Some nights I still wake up expecting to hear a branch snap a voice calling from the trees. But when I look out the window now, all I see is sky. All I hear is wind. Thank you for walking through this story with me. If it stayed with you, consider sharing it so no voice gets lost and no child goes unseen.